and welcome to this short recording of a webinar that we gave earlier on writing for impact for faculty rights at Colorado State University. I'm Christina Quinn, the director of CSU Rights, and we talked about what is impact itself, some of the ways that we might be able to frame it. We talked about stickiness and creating stickiness, what that looks like in writing. And we looked at some ideas that are about impact coming out from conversations at National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine workshop on rethinking researcher assessment and incentives that I attended this past fall. And it just brought up broadly larger conversations about assessing impact that I do think come to bear on our writing practices and our processes. I won't belabor that too much. We spent more time in the in-person webinar, but it's something for us to ponder. And so I have left it in for the re-recording. So some of the questions for us to consider were the impact that you want your work to have over the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe that you're thinking early career stages and you're going to make it through tenure and promotion processes, or you're maybe post tenure and you're looking at moving forward and promotion to full, or maybe you're looking towards your legacy projects and what contributions and impact do you want to have overall in the field. So what's that impact? What specific skills or strategies can you use to enhance, or will you need to develop and to increase that your writing's impact? And in which arenas and for what audiences will you be making that impact? It may be that you would like to shift at this point in your career, and rather than writing largely for expert audiences in academic journals, you may be wanting to write more communication pieces and writing to have impact in communities. So thinking about what's your impact, who are your audiences, and then also if you're not currently working on the projects that are most impactful and that are the most meaningful, maybe this is an opportunity for you to assess that and then consider what it is that you would want to put as your first projects and priority projects to be working on this semester. So we're talking about impact. I'm going back to last week's webinar on pressures, but only to kind of bring forward this notion of circle of control, circle of influence, and circle of concern. Broadly, that circle of concern is the areas that we don't have much control over, right? We don't, these are the huge kind of factors that are beyond our immediate influence, like climate change or political unrest, or just largely the nature of the field. So there are a lot of areas that are circles of concern, but not necessarily directly within our circle of influence or within our circle of control. So some of the conversation that I'll be bringing forward at the very end, most of that fits within the circle of concern. They're ideas about the fields, how we might be changing, assessing impact, or having conversations about how we assess impact. That is not anything that we probably have under our own control. We might have some influence depending on the committees and places we sit, but it's definitely not going to be in all of our areas of concern at the moment, and certainly not when we sit down to write immediately. What we do have influence over, though, and I think this is where most of our writing sits, is who in our field are we influencing? And then within our circle of control, what's our innermost circle, or what do we have direct power and decision-making over? And I think if our writing and our product or our projects are within the kind of circle of influence and within those conversations of the field, I think our writing practices and our processes and the decisions that we make that build those projects and those products, that is within our circle of control. The impact and the contribution that we make overall to the field of knowledge is incremental and just a little bit. I love this image from the Illustrated Guide to the PhD by Matt Might. You should look it up. It's a lovely little piece on how we engage or kind of get oriented within the field of knowledge and then make our own contributions to the bigger, picture in the field of knowledge. We do that largely through publication and other modes of dissemination. Our field of knowledge is not as discrete as this circle would suggest, but there are metrics for being able to measure it, and I don't know that our metrics are actually that good. We could think about the quality of the impact of your work on individual scholars. That doesn't necessarily show up in citation factors, for example, and the which journals you're publishing in. There might be a direct connection between those, or might not. I think impact is kind of a resource, kind of influencing the subsequent scholarships. So here's where we see that our influence might extend beyond our time at Colorado State University, beyond even our careers, and perhaps even our lifetime. And if that's kind of your goal, is to look at like what's going to be the broader impact of my work over time, there are elements both in terms of the structure and the research and the nature of the work that you're doing that would suggest that you would be able to have that kind of impact. But also then it's really important then to consider how it is that you're writing about the work that you're doing. You can have the best projects, as we know, in the world, the kind of most earth-shattering projects. And unless you're writing about them in ways that others can understand and kind of see through your lens and understand the import of your work, it's not going to have that impact. We do take certain kinds of measures. We can look at the number of views that your work is having. We can look at download numbers. We can look at references and citations. We can even look at maybe the number of conferences and conversations that you're engaged in. And that requires like repeated tracking and some metrics on the ground that we have built into our promotion processes. But note that I think that the impact, again, that you want to have will exceed those very metrics. That impact as textual affect. The affect of the text, I'd like to talk about the felt quality of the text. We often do not think about particularly our academic articles as having a tenor or a feeling to them. And yet the moment that you tell somebody that an article has a great flow or that it's readable, that suggests that there's a feeling that is flowing through the nature of that writing. Affect works through rhythm of language, through the pacing of that language, through where it is that we pause or place emphasis in the language, works through the narrative structure and the stories that we tell from beginning, middle, and end. And it even can work in the pauses and the silences, what we don't say, what we leave empty. Affect in research and scholarly writing operates subtly through kind of position or stance or how it is that we've arranged the details that suggest that these are the things that we looked at, but we didn't look at other things, for example. Again, the emphasis, the narrative framing, and how it is that we point attention and to certain factors or elements, visuals, for example. All of those create an affect and draw the reader's attention to kind of certain areas and key elements. If you're not clear on where you want your reader to be focusing or what you want them to be pulling from your piece, it may be showing up in your writing so that there is less clarity. There's more that's muddled, or there may be too much. It might be overwhelming. That has its own affect. It's probably not the affect that you're going for. And so we'll take a look at some models and recommendations from Joshua Schimmel's Writing Science, because he talks about stickiness as a kind of, I would say it's an affect. He doesn't talk about it as an affect. It's an affect that increases the likelihood that your work will be read, quoted, cited, and that it's going to be more memorable and quotable. And I have written a lot of long, dense, carefully thought, but fully wrought sentences that are not quotable. I think that was just one of them, right? So we do it all the time. We write all of these kind of great ideas, and then we have to find ways to edit them or make them memorable and quotable. So to make a story, what Joshua Schimmel calls sticky, he says, that some stories aren't sticky. They're just consumable. Others, however, they stay with you. You ponder them, you think about them, you pass them on, you share them with your lab mates, or you share them with your mentees. And so those are the ones that we want to be writing so that we know that our work is having impact, that it's worth us having put forward the time into those pieces of writing. The qualities are that they're simple, they're unexpected, concrete, that they're credible, emotional, interestingly enough, not in the way that, of course, that flowery language that we're thinking about, and that they contain some sort of storytelling structure. So he pulls this idea of sticky from Heath and Heath. And so we're going to take a look at the nature of the simple, the unexpected, the concrete, the credible, the emotional, and stories. And we'll have a couple examples after that. So simple is not simplistic. It contains the core essence of an important idea in a clear and compact way. Simple ideas, Schimmel notes, have power, right? So they capture the core of a problem, or they structure some meaning for us so that we can understand something better, that it's simpler language rather than jargon or too complex. And you can do it visually as well. I like this visual that he has from one of his articles with Bennett. And unexpected. So this quality of sticky that is unexpected. We want to give folks what's novel, what's new. Interestingly enough, if you are announcing what's novel or what's new, it might not actually feel so novel and new. You'll have to look at the different genres that you write in. I know in grant writing, your goal is to point out and point directly to what it is that you are asking funding for to do that is quote unquote new. But as you're writing up in different types of documents, your results or an analysis, you might not have to report it in that exact same way. So play around with words that you might drop in, the idea of new in your introduction, in your conclusion, and kind of bring your readers forward to go, oh, aha. So they come to that kind of aha, oh, I didn't see that, or oh, that's interesting and that's new. So what are some of the examples that you can find in your own writing or in other people's writing where that's happened? Would be helpful to keep track of, right? It's always good to have good examples on the way. Concrete, just a reminder that when we are writing, particularly analyses or theories about our work, that it's easy to get lost in lands of abstraction, but that they need to be brought back to the concrete. Schimmel reminds us that science is about data and that data are concrete, but that our ideas are abstractions and they are the antithesis of concrete. So they have to be held together and kind of grounded with something that is much more concrete. That could be in the way that you're describing it. It could also be in the way that you're connecting, then making a clear connection between your data, your findings, your ideas and understandings. Needs to be credible. We want to know that our ideas are grounded in the work that has come before. We're not just making things up on our own, that our work is important because it has a legacy, that we're in conversation with others. If you have been dropped into a project and you're not quite sure what that literature is or what the history and the lineages of your project are, have many conversations, of course, with your colleagues and your advisor, but then also, or mentors, but also be thinking about then, like, what's your literature review? Who's had these conversations before? Chances are you'll discover in the process of putting together the background for your own idea, folks that you've never read before or heard of before, but who are discussing ideas very similar to yours. And it helps us to be able to understand that you know what that lay of the land is before you start sharing out and then your ideas and what you think are the next steps for future conversations. Get emotional work and writing within the affect of scientific or academic writing is not emotional in the same way that it would be for a piece of fiction, right? It's not the same kind of qualities. But what you are doing is you're drawing on the curiosity and the excitement of your readers. You're letting them see through your eyes what it is that you have been curious about what it is that you've done, and then why it is that you're excited about this project and this new understanding, new knowledge or new assessment and analysis. And stories. Stories are one of the ways that we are able to make meaning. They have a clear structure, that kind of beginning, middle, and end. Even stories that are told narratively out of structure, we often retell them in a beginning, middle, and end. So I'm thinking about like movies like Memento, where the timing is off, or they go backwards through time. We often retell it from the part of where it had started back in time, but goes forward in time. So thinking about the way that you shape your own either argument within an article or the story that you're telling about a piece in science communication for another audience. You're going to shape it to the genre. You're going to shape it to the audience itself. And so the story that you tell is not going to be exactly the same, even if you're telling the same story, but to different audiences through different venues, different genres. Just know that that story is going to shift and change a little bit, but you're going to be able to find kind of that logical flow, the connection of ideas and how they add up to create that whole for your readers so that they can pick it up and retell it. Right? So to tell if you're writing a sticky, you can ask yourself if others can repeat in conversation what it is that you've given them. Can they say it to others? Can they put it on a slide? This is again thinking about the impact of your work. It may not actually be measurable through citations and publications, but there's no way that Carol Dweck knows that I'm using her work right here as an example. Or Jensen, she might know eventually that I'm using it as an example, but it's unlikely that they're going to count, this is going to count for any of their metrics, right? For tenure promotion, right, moving forward. But it isn't the impact of their work because the quality of writing here and the portability of these sentences and these ideas is really remarkable. So Carol Dweck reminds us that in a growth mindset, challenges are exciting rather than threatening. They're opportunities to grow. So we have this kind of great descriptions of challenges in a growth mindset. Communal sharing of knowledge is fundamental to the norm of science. Merton kind of gives us this wonderful kind of description of the scientific enterprise as being inherently communal and about sharing. I love that. And Julie Jensen in Write No Matter What talks about how scholarly writing is a practice and not a performance. And it's something that we do regularly. It takes us to the craft, right? It's a practice. We're not just getting out and doing a performance once, we're practicing. So put them on a slide, just like I did. We did also in the webinar take a look at the impact as talked about in the sphere of concern, the things that we don't necessarily have often direct influence over unless you're in one of these workshops and having these conversations. But it's worth us considering that there are additional ways for us to consider impact other than the standard kind of what's going on your annual review, how are you being measured for tenure and promotion perhaps, or what it is that you're calculating for your clicks, your downloads, or other things. But looking at like, how can we extend broadly, and I think it's just worth us having these conversations in relation to our writing, the value of our research beyond traditional academic kind of outputs and thinking about engagement with broader social and community needs, open access and sharing of our work and what that does. And is it quotable? Is it portable? You're maybe writing for a specialized audience and it needs to be quotable and portable for them. If you're writing perhaps for a different publication, a science communication venue, or for one of the source stories, for example, to share out, then you're wanting it to be for a different audience and it needs to be differently portable and, shareable. Thinking about research transparency and integrity and ways that you might be able to share through your writing what it is that your lab is doing with its data. Thinking about mentorship and career development contributions. Mentoring through writing is essential as far as I'm concerned. So career development happens often through the written word. Team science and collaborative work, oh my goodness, the ways that we share writing and how it is that we give feedback to one another and communicate about our writing is super important. And thinking about technology and knowledge transfer and other relationships that we might want to build in that arena. And then cultural and institutional alignments over our work and thinking about how broadly higher education and science and research scholarship is perceived currently and what it is that we might be able to do in order to be able to reach out and align institutional and cultural outputs and impacts. So these are just some of the these are huge considerations, but they're big conversations for us to be thinking about over time and think about the impact and what it is that we're writing and choosing to focus our work on. Again, some closing questions. What's the impact of your work? Where do you want it to be in the next 5 to 10 years? What's going to take you there? What do you need to be working on? And then thinking about the audiences for those impacts. Are there new audiences? Are there new ways for you to reach out and write new and exciting, effective ways? All right, just a reminder, CSU Writes, we've got Show Up and Write is running starting this week. And those are drop-in writing sessions where you can get some work done, put them on your calendar and just show up. And then we've got a book club coming up in March. So that gives you a little bit less than a month to read a book on the AI con. It's going to be a robust conversation for sure. And until we meet again, may your writing be brief, frequent, low stress, and highly rewarding.